Welcome to part 2 of our Getting Real with Crypto series, where I bring the team, the guys that I work with, around the table to talk about certain things that are pertinent to this life in NFTs, crypto, and everything that we hold dear. EIP 1559 is now a week and a half old. We have seen the Ethereum ecosystem just blossom this year. And right at the heart of Ethereum is this guy, Vitalik. Vitalik has made a ton of money. He doesn't really care anymore about money. What he cares about is creating value, changing the world, and doing some interesting things. Earlier this year, a story arose around Vitalik that the SHIB tokens that he was gifted, because the SHIB team decided they would just airdrop Vitalik all these tokens. I don't really know why they decided to, but I think it was just, as some kind of flex, because to them, those tokens didn't have any value. But what Vitalik did was he gave, and I think the number was 1.2 billion SHIB tokens to an India COVID relief fund set up by Sandeep Narwal from Matic, or Polygon as it's now known. This is Vitalik gifting. Gifting as a concept feels incredibly strange to crypto people because we are encouraged to embrace this idea of hodl. Hodl is clutch it close, don't let it go. Gifting is the exact opposite of that. It's let it go freely. And I wanted to revisit this idea because last year, my boss, Camilla Rousseau, received out of the blue a gift of 64 ETH. 64 ETH is significant because it takes 32 ETH to run a node on Ethereum's staking network. 64 ETH, 2 nodes. Now, 64 ETH back then didn't seem like a lot of money. Now it seems like a significant amount of money. And the person who gifted it to Camilla is anonymous, but he wrote a letter that Camilla then published. And in that letter, there were some really interesting ideas that I wanted to foreground again. In it, he said the Nakamoto consensus incentivizes sharing information as quickly as possible and as freely as possible. And he also said that the sustainable value comes from the willingness to share it, to meaningfully gift what is of value. So in that article, he was putting the point that crypto gifting is the yin to crypto capitalism's yang. In other words, pay it forward, give stuff away. And we're starting to see this with Gitcoin grants. We're starting to see quadratic funding. But it is so difficult to wrap your head around that concept when if you're coming from a place of not having any money, having terrible savings rates, your local currency is being devalued all the time, to an idea of giving stuff away with no expectation of return. What on earth is that all about? We are not Bill Gates here. And yet, more and more over the course of the last 2 years, I found myself doing this, not because I want to be a good person, not because I want to be, seen as someone who's a benefactor or whatever. It's just because that's just what I did. Around this table are 3 people to whom I gifted Bored Apes. Now, I'm going to leave it to them to tell you how I did this, but it happened, it's real, and they're here to kind of explain how it happened. So a quick word for our sponsors, because without them, we couldn't actually make all the shows that we make. And the first one up is Balancer, who've been a fantastic supporter of the Defiant and consistently proven themselves to be one of the best DeFi protocols in town. Their gas-optimized vault architecture makes trading cheaper than anywhere else. Liquidity providers can optimize their fee earnings using the dynamic fee system that automatically adjusts to market conditions. You can also use asset managers to lend out idle assets, dramatically increasing your capital efficiency. And because Balancer is an open platform for flexible, automated markets, you can choose from stable pools or weighted pools, and in the future, tons and tons more designs will be created that frankly, we don't even know about yet. Check it out at balancer.fi. Our next sponsor is Ive. Fun fact, the name Ive is actually taken from the Finnish word for ghost. And it's a decentralized, open source and non-custodial liquidity protocol built on Ethereum. Depositors earn interest by providing liquidity to lending pools, while borrowers can obtain loans by tapping into these pools with variable and stable interest rate options. Deposit into Ive protocol and receive A tokens, which accrue interest every second right in your wallet. And it's fun just seeing your balance just go every second. Swap any of your deposited assets at any time to get the best yields on the market. And for the developers out there, Ive features access to DeFi building blocks like flash loans and credit delegation. The Ive protocol liquidity pools are now available on Ethereum and everyone's favorite sidechain, Polygon. Gary, what was it like? What actually happened?
I have no idea. It didn't really land for me when I got it. I didn't really understand the gravity of receiving a picture of a monkey that was worth more money than I've managed to save for a really long time. I think I needed time to kind of process what that meant. And
question is, were you aware of what I was doing? Were you aware? Did you think it was weird?
Well, you go to a man's workplace and he just gives you a monkey. It's a little bit weird. So yeah, it was a bit strange. People don't generally just give stuff out to other people for no reason. So I worked for a massive multimedia corporation before this, and they would probably steal your blood from you while you were sitting there working for them. So going from that and then the complete opposite of someone just like, hey, here's this thing that might be valuable. At the time it wasn't as impacting, and over the few weeks afterwards, I couldn't wrap my head around it.
Alp, you're more savvy about the crypto space than Gary was when he came in, and you've been on this journey with me for some time. I seem to remember we just had a moment where we just said, right, we're getting Apes. This is it. And you know me now, but like, was that out of character for me, or was that expected?
I would say it was slightly expected, but I would not say something for as expensive as BAYC at the time, and it wasn't like as expensive as it is today. It was a little above an ETH at the time, and I remember like it was in June. I came into the office, we started talking about it, and then I said, "Come on, we're buying an ape for you," and I was the first in the office to get it. And then we looked at some of the apes, and then after browsing for like 30 seconds, we said, okay, it's too expensive. I'm not getting this. And then I sit back down, and like 5 minutes later, you call me again, and you say, okay, we're getting it. And then you got it, and it's not the first time you're giving me an NFT away. I remember the first time you were experimenting with NFTs, you gave those to me as well. I'm a owner of the direct supermassive NFT series, the first ones.
That is valueless, you know that, right?
Well,
that
it will be valuable.
It's a collector's item that is really just meaningful on a cultural level and on a financial level. Not at all. I'm curious what Daniel thinks, because Daniel is probably the most rational of the people that work in the office, and he comes from a financial background, working in Bunk, which is a Dutch bank. Coming into this, did you think things like that would happen?
Robin, I worked in production in a Dutch bank, so I avoided the financial aspect as much as humanly possible. I was under the impression when it was first happening that it wasn't the financial incentive that appealed to you, it was the idea of all of us collectively being in this together. And having that aspect was something that really appealed to you, but also the idea of all of us having skin in the game and having our ears to the ground and being more attentive to the space as a whole. Because if you're not in it, you're more likely to drop out. Like in the first couple of months that I was here, I was solely focused on the production aspect, creating the content, making sure that it was of the standard that we wanted. And when it came to the actual space, it was secondary. And then when that came into my life, it all of a sudden was much more prominent, and I was much more attentive to the space as a whole. So that was the original thinking that I had.
Yeah, no, it's definitely that. I think the challenge that we always have with this is that in order to access the space, people have to spend money, and it comes from the real world. And in the real world, money is hard earned, and it's difficult to come by, and it's precious, and it's also, it devalues really quickly. And so having it and being liquid in the real world is a very different animal to being liquid in crypto. And so for me, there's something sort of gauche about giving people tokens, because tokens feel like money. These things don't feel like money. They feel like a completely different thing. So it has a lot more soul to it. It's a really weird and awkward way to explain it, but you're absolutely right. The ability to choose one of these assets that resonated with you. I remember you picked one that had a fez, because you kind of liked that one. And we went through and we looked at some, and then we started trying to find which ones were the rarest, but also the cheapest, some kind of value proposition there. But it really wasn't. It wasn't spending a ton of money. It was like an ETH maybe, and I know that still sounds like a lot, but it was more, as you say. I wanted you guys to be present in the space in a way that you didn't feel threatened financially by. You didn't feel under pressure to sell. You didn't feel under pressure because you felt like an investment decision was unwise or you were worried about it. And I hoped that it would inspire some curiosity to dig in further or look deeper or I guess fundamentally realize the power of this space. It is now very clear to me that there is no comparison between, let's say I gave you an ETH. I don't think you would have had anywhere near as much fun or involvement or engagement or as much of a roller coaster journey with that than you've had with your ape. Now, you may have sold your ape, but that was just the beginning of a journey, and that was a hugely profitable experience that you can then reinvest or take into the real world or whatever. But it made a big difference. For me personally, I really wasn't thinking that hard about it. I have more and more come to the conclusion that I would much prefer people not to lose money. I would much prefer people to get the experience that I've had in this space in a consequence-free way. And I know that is a really luxury thing to be able to offer to people, but you guys come and work really hard here. And I just wanted you to experience what I experienced because I'm talking about it constantly, and it seems deeply unfair for me to be talking about stuff that's going up or that's increasing in value and be excited about it when you don't have any of it. And then by doing this, we were able to share in that. And what I've learned now is that, I buy as many of these things as I can. It's not an investment. It's so I can give them to other people because I feel like they are a really powerful onboarding process for people. And this idea of gifting is starting to emerge as something that's really potent and interesting. And we're now going to go and talk to Richard Welsh, a friend of mine from the UK, who is building gifting into this brand new project he's launching called Kabocha. Break it down for me so that people who are just kind of trying to understand what Kabocha is. What is your thesis around changing the name funding to gifting? Because you pitched this to me and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And you may not have formulated it completely yet, but why go that route? Why change the language to that extent?
So the principle of Kabocha, which is a project that we're spinning off Edgeware. Edgeware, for those who don't know, is a project that was birthed in the Substrate ecosystem, which is part of Polkadot, which is this sort of this interconnected network of chains that each have a kind of application-specific purpose to them. Edgeware was one of the first chains that launched alongside Kusama and Polkadot, and it launched with something called a lock drop in 2018, where the team effectively enabled anyone who was holding ETH at the time to lock their tokens for 3, 6, 9, 12 months, and in return they would get Edgeware tokens. They gave away 90% of the tokens, which, if you understand most of the distributions in crypto, that's like wild. So the founding team who launched it, Commonwealth Labs, I think only retained 6%. Whether it was intentional at the time, what you do is if you give away all those tokens, you open the door to an actual community to turn up and tell you, no, we don't agree with all your ideas. And so we've ended up in this kind of amazing mess of all these different opinions, all these different arguments. But fundamentally, we have a kind of open community where anyone can put forward a proposal, decide what they want to build. And so Kabocha is kind of like an extension of this sort of mad, as you said, it's like a nice metaphor, your kind of swamp, or your sort of like the kind of the substrate, well, literal and figurative substrate, where Kabocha is this kind of evolution of, or the second stage of on-chain governance as we see it. So on-chain governance for Substrate is kind of, rather than on-chain governance in the kind of ETH ecosystem, Substrate chains have the ability to create a treasury that is a kind of layer one treasury that's basically derived from the actions of the blockchain. That pulls into a fund, and then we govern that through proposals. So Kabocha, and we've got like Substrate is quite complicated. There's lots of different layers to governance. There's lots of different kind of like levers you can pull. There's lots of like, you can have a council, you can have all this different stuff. And I think because there's so many levers you can pull, it's kind of like a Swiss Army knife. People are like, well, we could do this, we could do this, we could do this. And naturally, when you've got lots of levers to pull, it can kind of like divert people from, you end up sort of refining the bureaucracy rather than figuring out actually what's the thing that this is for, that we can maybe remove a bunch of like a bunch of barriers. And so with Kabocha, the idea is that the community, Edgeware is this chain that exists as a solo chain. So it has its own validators, one of the only mainnet chains in Polkadot. We're going to launch effectively duplicate the distribution. There's going to be a 1-for-1 distribution, which is yet to be confirmed completely. So I'm going to caveat that as a star on that. But effectively a 1-to-1 distribution with edge holders who will get Kabocha. Kabocha will launch into Kusama. Kusama is like the sort of the network that was kind of originally intended as a sort of a value-bearing testnet of Polkadot, but actually has turned into its own thing, is arts and culture focused. And so, having come from an arts and culture background and public service broadcasting, and basically having startups, running film production companies, being around really interesting creative people, the frustration I have, which is probably the same as your frustration, has always been you just need the money to give people a start, to get them going. And by the time you've done the 15th version of a treatment, by the time you've made another taster tape or reel for something, you just don't care about the project anymore. And so for me with Kabocha, what we want to try and achieve is a place where people can request funding in small incremental grants. We're calling it like a scaled retainer. So where there is the ability for you to start with an idea and just pull a red thread and just go, you know what, we're going to fund you because you're doing something interesting. And because that interesting thing is going to open interesting doors, we're going to document that process. And so ultimately Edgeware, Kabocha is a kind of place for just like telling new stories and giving talent a chance to kind of invest over the long term in ideas that can, well, exist to show people there are there is another way to kind of do stuff. I mean, we've got a project that's in regenerative farming. We've got a project that's like arts and culture, kind of like experiential, kind of outdoor, like media stuff. We've got something that's something to do with the legal system, about how no one realizes the whole legal system is derived from this. I'm not even going to explain it very well, but it's basically something to do with that. I don't even know. Someone wants to do that. There's something which is about how we could enable academics to kind of better research projects. There's something in renewable energy that's to do with magnets. Like, there's all sorts of weird shit that, like, I think is just like this interesting soup of stuff. And on top of that, we're going to build a publishing platform. And then we're going to tell the stories of these projects as they evolve. And rather than there being a thing, as in, right, you're done now, Robin, like, here's your product, here's your output, like, you're going to do it as long as you think it's interesting. And we're going to fund you as long as we think as a community it's interesting. And then that's it, really. Like, and there are other ideas that we're going to throw into it in terms of how we think we can build fundamental value. In crypto, everyone talks about fundamental value. Like, people have been talking about currencies, like social stable coins that are maybe backed by natural capital. Like the Cello team have got a kind of interesting play on that. And the idea is sort of derived from Charles Eisenstein's Sacred Economics, which is all around, which kind of relates to your gifting culture, because he talks a lot about gifting culture. And Sacred Economics, there's this idea that anything we use as a backing for a currency drives more demand of that thing. So therefore, gold as a backing for a currency means that there's more demand as that currency grows. There's more demand for that underlying thing, which is why we ended up like creating so much demand for gold. So the idea that Sacred Economics posits is, well, why don't we like add demand for more things that we want more of in the world, like beautiful forests, clean water, arts and culture, all this sort of stuff. Right now, people are trying to do that in a very engineering way, which is like, right, we're going to get a forest, we're going to get the legal agreements for the forest, and we're going to stick them in the reserve. And so that's going to be the forest that's back in the currency. But the interesting thing is, you go, well, you're not actually putting the forest to back the currency, because the forest is still there. You've got a legal agreement, which is itself an imaginary thing. So why don't we just skip over the sort of imaginary thing and just have beautiful visuals that reflect the forest? Why don't we have the sort of the sounds and the voices of an indigenous tribe in the Amazon? Like, these things are valuable because it's the idea of the rainforest, it's the idea of the ecosystem, it's the idea of these things that's important. That's the thing that when you watch a documentary, when you watch a film, that's the thing that changes your perception of the world and makes you actually go and do things. You don't care or need to care about the legal agreement. You just need to care about having that emotional connection to a story that motivates you to do something. And that can be represented as an NFT in an interesting way, that idea, that concept. And so I think this is probably where we'll take Kabocha and projects like it, is experiments in, like, how do you hold a reserve of ideas, concepts, things that we want to see more of in the world. And then we're going to experiment with all sorts of stuff like demurrage currencies, which are basically currencies that devalue over time. So you're incentivized to not hodl. It's exactly the opposite. So anyway, so it's going to be a place where I hope it'll be a bit of a kind of Marmite place where people will look at it. A lot of people will go, I don't understand this, don't get it, won't work. And if we're doing that and people say that, then we're probably on the right track. So that's kind of like Kabocha.
And we're back. So listen, you have now sold your apes. The circle is complete. How do you feel?
Now that it's done, I feel it's a weird kind of feeling of sad that it's over, because there were so many things that happened during the period that we actually had them. So the price was going up and down, fluctuating so much. We were constantly talking about it in work almost daily. The Kennel Club was released. Some of us sold our dogs. Gary, you had that fiasco with the 4-eat dog, which was hilarious, and it worked out. But now that it's over, it ended the way I couldn't have dreamed of it ending in a better way, because it gave me an opportunity to literally plant my feet into the space and also have the finances to not fret about it about anything in the short term, which is more than I could have ever imagined. And yeah, I'm very thankful and incredibly satisfied and interested in this space now, and just want to continue within it.
That is it's all I ever wanted. I think this space is so constructive, but it's also deeply destructive, because people fixate on money and they stress out about losing money. And for me, in the gifting process, you remove money from the equation. Obviously, there's money involved and you can sell everything else, but your own money, that kind of the ability to castigate yourself for having been foolish, goes away to a degree. I'm not sure. You probably feel foolish now for having sold, given now the scope of where Apes is growing up. But you have to believe that this is a step along the process, and you are infinitely further ahead, at least financially, than you were. But now it's like, well, what's next? And that's a great place to be in, because now you're curious. But you're in a different position because you've been in this space longer and you know more. But now what?
Now what? First of all, you said it's over. It's actually not over, because now I'm going on OpenSea and seeing who owns my ape now. You know, who's the next owner of my previous sold ape. But I asked my question to myself as well. What do I do with the ETH that I just sold? And I actually don't know what
ETH is deflationary, everyone. EIP 1559 is going to get burnt forever. 90% ultrasound money. You know it. Yeah, it's going to go up. Money go up. Ah. You hold that shit, right? You don't spend it, you hold it.
Okay, what's next? I don't know, yield farming, liquidity providing, trading. Definitely not going to cash it out and turn it into euros, dollars, whatever. I'm going to keep it in the system.
But you feel like you've got breathing room and you've got agency. Yeah. And it was always my thing is like, during the rug pull experiment, it was always, nobody should lose money except me. Because I'm okay with losing money. You guys know me now. You know how I operate. Is anything that I do normal? Is the way I operate normal? No. Am I having the best time? Yes. So why should I be any different? You know, I'm in that incredible position where I can do this stuff like this, and I get such a kick out of seeing you guys go through the ringer, looking at, oh my God, should I sell? Because I know that whatever happens, you won, and that is awesome. Gary, I remember you said to me yesterday, this was life-changing. I don't think it really was life-changing for you, but it means a lot that you said that. Can you explain what you meant by that?
The last few years have been really financially difficult. Had a lot of ups and downs, and COVID hitting and losing a job. So at the start of this year, I knew what it felt like to be definitely on the down and out. So going from such a bad place to one with a level of kind of like power and confidence, it can really like flip the way that you view things. You know, walking to work in the morning, one day you're staring at the ground, busy worrying about entirely different things, and the next day you can worry about something else. So there's always just that shift away from this constant pressure of just finances in general. But I think the key focus here is just that the bored apes is Robin is bored and we are just the apes in the experiment. He just comes here, throws out his NFTs and just watches go bananas behind the scenes, just watching those numbers go up and down. But I would say now that I've sold my ape, I made the mistake of looking what my ape is going for now. I closed the window very quickly and just try to shift the mindset. It's money gained, not money lost. And I think I'd probably do the same, keep most of the money in the system, look at different ways that I can invest it. But I'm also really curious now to find out more about these types of projects that are coming out. What's the next Bored Apes, but what else is really fun? What else is groups of people doing interesting and new initiatives? And I kind of want to do the exact same thing. I have a lot of friends that I speak about this space and these projects, and it makes no sense to them. It makes no sense to me, but I learn a little bit every day. And if I could give someone something like that, in a heartbeat, definitely. I mean, I would love for my friends to come visit me, or me to just go overseas and just spend time with that family. And definitely.
Yeah, it's a weird thing because if you want it, there is not only a thing that has value that can go up and down in value and it can be a little bit scary, but there's a whole community of people that also go on the same path and on the same journey. And amongst those communities are people who think the same way that you do and who are looking for other people to do stuff with. And it is a soup, like we talked about with Richard. It is there if you want it. If you don't want it, then fine. But we spent quite a lot of money on the apes that we bought, and they ended up being a very good kind of... It actually ended up being a good moment to buy them. But there are a ton of these assets right now, like the dogs, for instance, that are a lot cheaper, but could also go on the same trajectory. I'm not saying that they will, but Top Dogs, for instance, has just a really nice community, like a really genuinely nice community. And I love the way they do things and how honest and humble they are. And it's just a nice place to hang out. And you can exist across all these different communities and find people who are interesting to hang out with as well. And I think it's that curiosity, it's just removing that initial tough decision to how to onboard people. If we can do that through a fun thing, which is like a dog or an ape, stupid ape, it allows you to sort of start reprogramming the way we think about value. You've talked about looking at your feet on the floor. I think that is you saying, I don't value myself enough. And coming to an environment where you're like, well, then we value you. We value you enough to give you a JPEG. Oh shit, that JPEG is worth, in Daniel's case, quite a lot. So that is weird and wonderful and strange. But I'm heartened to hear that you would say you would do the same and try and figure out a way, because that's all I want to do is like make onboarding for people easier. And I'm in a position of privilege. I can do this stuff, and like I feel like it's on me to do that. Hoddling these things and preserving wealth, it makes no sense to me at all.
Well, I think the staring at the ground and not having value in myself, I guess it's kind of a knock-on effect, but it is also largely to do with, work hard every single day for years and, that money just gets eaten up through all these different financial things and difficulties and COVID and everything. So it's also a bit of a distrust in the system we already have. You know, how is that really helping me if I'm putting in so much time? And then something like this, where I haven't put time and effort and work into, but that has a type of different intrinsic value. It's really made me question, like, what the hell is money? Like, what are these differences? And maybe I could do something that I really enjoy and create art and not have to look at it like I'm busy grinding every day.
Yeah, that's exactly it. There is, well, I think everyone has a talent of some sort, and that's a talent that can be registered in some form of value. And we're so accustomed to being told that our rate is here, or that we are in competition with X number of people, and that there is this funding, and actually, no, sorry, you don't tick these boxes. But actually, talent, when it comes to you as a dog or as a duck, doesn't give a shit where you come from, doesn't give a shit where you live, doesn't give a shit what you have done. If you are good and you contribute, then you have value. And your ability to kind of dig in and be of value is completely unbounded by any of those things. And that is a deeply profound thing. But at the end of the day, you know, I think the thing that I enjoy most about all this is just fun. It's just fun. I enjoy seeing you guys struggle with bot bids, because I know that you're learning stuff and it's meaningful. But also I know that it doesn't even matter, because at the end of the day, you've won either way. It doesn't matter. Anyway, that is our experience of gifting here. It feels in some ways kind of just a little bit of a circle jerk, and that's not really the way it's meant. I guess the point is there is a different way to look at crypto, which is don't hodl, spend, give things away, and other stuff comes back. I don't really know where this goes. I don't really know how I'm going to evolve into this, but what I do know is that I have never had more fun than I've had with these. And it never felt more like the right thing to do, to give these guys who work so hard for me some skin in the game. It just happened to be Bored Apes. It could have been something that didn't do, you know, what Bored Apes has done, but at the same time, it was. And it was an amazing collective shared experience. I still have my ape. I'm not going to sell this guy. But these, over and above tokens, have a huge amount of value that I don't think we've even really realized yet. And when we see an ape sale at Christie's, it's really, I think, the tip of the iceberg. So for those of you who are skeptical about NFTs, maybe look at the other side of it. Maybe look at the stories that we've uncovered today and see if there's something for you there. And also, you know, make friends in these communities, because it's very difficult to sell these things. People who buy them are kind of in it for the long run. They're not really flipping and jumping out. So yeah, there are some great relationships to be formed. But that is our thesis on gifting. If you have gifting stories, share them in the comments below. Subscribe, like, do all that stuff. Give someone an ape. Yeah, as if. But maybe take a look at top dogs. Maybe take a look at sub ducks. Maybe take a look at, I don't know, pick an animal. That's it for today. I'll see you on the next one. We'll be back from holiday with digital fashion. I froze there for a second. Do you see that? Peace!